This is my Dewalt DW788 scroll saw. I've had it for 14, maybe 15 years. It's been a great saw, but in the last 15 years, this will be the third time I've had to do this. A little bit of maintenance. It happens every now and then. Now, it sounds kind of loud, but wait till I put a little bit of resistance to the blade. I don't know how well you can hear that in the video, but there's a little bit of a knocking noise coming from the saw, and it's coming from back here in the back of the saw. And what that is there's an armature back there, and the armature is enclosed in this cast iron casing, and the nut will fall off of it. Well, the screw or the bolt can't come out because the casing is too close on the left and the right, so it just sits in there and it's loose and it flops up and down and makes a nice knocking noise. I tried putting a nylon lock washer on there last time I did this, but I guess just with use over time it works loose. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go ahead and disassemble this saw, show you the problem, we're going to fix it, and then we'll put the saw back together again. First thing I did was unplug the saw. I did leave the light plugged in. I'm going to use it to my advantage. Next thing I want to do is remove the tension from the blade, and I'm going to go ahead and take the blade out and get it out of the way. We need to remove our table. Now there are two Allen keys or Allen screws on the front of the table, and they are 5 millimeters, and there's a third screw back here that's 4 millimeters, and it's got a nut on the opposite side of it, which is going to be 10 millimeters. I've already gathered my tools. So let's go ahead and remove this hardware. And then the table will just lift off. It's a little tight in the back. There we go. And I'll set it out of the way. Next up, I need to remove the blade guard. Now, the blade guard has two Allen screws, and they appear to be 9/64 of an inch. So I'm ready to go with my tool. Let's go ahead and remove the screws. I need to remove the housing, and the housing has two screws up front that are 9/64 hex or Allen, and it has three bolts with nuts on them. The bolts are 4 millimeter Allen heads, and the nuts are 10 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this housing. We'll take the screws out, the 9/64 inch screws out first. And of course, it's impossible to do without dropping one. I've recovered the drop screw. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the three bolts. Try to keep the hardware together because I'm going to have to put it back and I don't want to lose any of it. And we'll pull the housing loose. You want to be really careful at this point because you have no rigidity to your saw and you don't want to damage any of these internal components. What I'm going to do is pull the saw out a little bit so that I can get to the bolts and nuts on the back of the unit, because we're going to next take this back housing apart. I've gone ahead and shut down the light. I'm going to unplug that. It's not really helping, and the housing is metal, so it's getting a little hot, and every now and then I touch it, and just not real comfortable. I think what I'm going to do now is my light, there are two 4mm Allen screws that are holding the light in place. It could stay on the housing, but it adds extra weight. So when I take the screws out, it's going to be a lot more difficult to fight the parts. So I think I'm going to go ahead and remove the light armature, or the light fixture, and should take just a second. There are 6 4mm screws and nuts holding this back housing on, so we're going to go ahead and remove each of those. In order to get the housing to come apart, I'm going to need to remove the bolt that holds it to the stand. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And now I should be able to separate the housing. I'm going to lift up a little bit. There we go. And this is what the inside of your DeWalt looks like. The part that's come loose is right here. And I'll show you just how loose it is. It's a T30 Torx. Look at that, I can just spin it. On the other side is a nut. So what I'm going to do is get a wrench, get a hold of that nut, and then I'm going to tighten this down, and we'll be able to reassemble the saw, and that should take care of the knock. The closest thing I could find was an 11/32 inch wrench that would fit that nut. I'm just going to tighten it down. There we go. And I just use this little small metal wrench. It's a thin wrench. Otherwise, you've got to remove all of this to get a socket or a standard thickness wrench on there. I'm lucky that I have these because they save me from having to go any farther. Now what we need to do is put this back together, and I'm going to go ahead and start assembly and probably do most of the assembly right here on the table, and then we'll set this on the stand and get it bolted back down. I'm ready to go ahead and put the side back on. There's a couple of things you have to pay attention to. There's a plate right here that needs to slide into these grooves, and then of course you've got the protector for the cord, and you need to make sure that that is seated properly. So I'm going to go ahead and try to work this into place. Oops. You'll know if you miss because nothing will line up. There we go. All right, I've got the case together. Now I'm going to attempt to set it up. There we go. Very carefully. I don't want it to fall apart. And I'm going to go ahead and slide my screws, or my Allen screws in. and get ready to put the nuts on the opposite side. Got to watch out because I grabbed the wrong slot there. There's that one, and there's 2 more. 1 and 2. All right, all the bolts are in. Go ahead and grab the nuts, and we'll tighten them down. I'm just going to snug them. I'll wait till I get everything together and come back and tighten at the end. I think that's a smarter idea because I don't want anything to get out of alignment. That'll let me do any adjustments that might need to be done prior to final tightening. Only 5 of the bolts have nuts. The one in the center just actually goes straight into the other side of the frame. It's opposite of the motor here, and it doesn't require a nut. Okay, I'll go ahead and tighten it down. Whoops. One last one. Let me find where it goes. There it is. Nice thing about these is once you get them started, they tighten down because there is a hexagonal compartment for the nut. Okay, everything seems to be lined up pretty good, except for I'm going to have to back it out. I don't know how well you can see this, but the cord at the end, let me bring it around a little bit. I let it slip out of the containment, and you can't just shove it in. It's a little too large to do that. It's ribbed, I guess you might say. It's got a little rib on it. So we'll do this. We'll loosen this screw, and we'll loosen this screw. And now I can force it apart just a little bit. And there we go. Now it's in there, and we'll tighten her back down. And at this point, everything appears to be lined up. This is good. I'm going to go ahead and cinch all these bolts down so that they're good and tight. I need to go ahead and attach these 2 side panels, but before I do that, I need to set the saw back on the base and get it attached to the base, and I'll show you why. The bottom of these panels has screw holes that made up with the front section of the saw, and this is what's going to give the saw its rigidity. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of the saw on the base. We'll get it tightened down on the back with the nut back in the back here, and then we'll assemble the 2 side pieces. I tell you what, before I put this bolt in, so I don't get it cranked in there sideways, I'm going to go ahead and put the 2 side pieces on, run the 2 screws through here and the screw through here, and that should help give me some rigidity, and then I can lock the back down. Okay. Get the bolts through there. I'm having a little trouble getting the front one to come all the way through, so I'm going to go ahead and just finger tighten these nuts so that way I don't drop this, and then we can work this final bolt into place. So it needs to raise up a little bit. Tell you what, I'm going to take this one out and see if I can get the front one in. There we go, there's the front one. Now let me try to slide that back one in. Go ahead and get this nut started. Looks like I've got good clearance. I've got good clearance, it just doesn't seem to want to. There we go. All right, looks like it's coming through. Let me go ahead and thread it on through. Yeah, there we go. And I can put the nut on, and we'll go ahead and tighten these down. Make sure everything looks good, and I'm happy with how it looks. All right, looks good. Everything's lined up. This is ready for its screws. Now I'm going to go ahead and assemble the blade guard, which will also hold the head in place. And then there's 2 screws that will go into the other side. So let's go ahead and get this lined up and okay, got the first one started. Now let's get the second one in there. Go ahead and tighten these down. And we've got the 2 screws that hold the head in place on the opposite side, so let's go ahead and get them started. Okay. Now what I want to do is get the table put back on the saw. I removed this piece from the back of the table. It basically goes right here, and then there's a little pin on it that seats into the back of the table. It'd be easier if we go ahead and attach this first, and then we can add the table once it's in place, and it should align everything up perfectly by doing it this way. Slide the table up on here. Slide it right into there. Okay. Grab my number 5 Allen. And let's see what we can do here. See if I can hold that in place while I, whoops. Apologize, but I'm about to get in front of the camera because doing it from that angle, I just really can't see to line the screw up. There we go. Screws lined up. I'm going to finger tighten it. I'm going to go ahead and get the other one in and finger tighten it, and then I'll come back with the Allen wrench and torque them down a little bit. There we go. Took a second to get everything aligned, but it is now in good shape. And I'm just going to tighten these down. There's one. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and reattach the light. The back screw's a little finicky. Oops. All right, I've gone ahead and attached the nut at the back of the saw to make sure it's securely attached to the base. I've moved the saw back into its little alcove here. I've gone ahead and reattached and tensioned my blade. Now what I'm going to do is turn it on and let you hear the difference in the sound that the saw is making. Can you hear the difference? You don't hear that clicking noise? And now when I put a little bit of much quieter, much smoother operation. I'd like to thank you for joining me today for what is not really a typical video of mine, but what was a video of a very necessary task. I feel very happy when I took this apart that the nut had not disconnected from that bolt in the armature back here, because if it had, it would have made it more difficult to get it reattached. So basically we just had to tighten things up, and I'm probably good for another 2-3 years before it loosens up again. But if you listen to your saw, you know how it sounds when you use it. As soon as you notice it sounding a little odd, stop, try to find out where that noise is coming from. Most likely it's back in here. That's where most of the activity takes place. And go ahead and get things tightened up and corrected and get your saw back to functioning 100%. I'd like to thank you for joining me in the shop today. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon.